Welcome everyone to Pivotal Stats, where we talk about data analysis techniques, business intelligence platforms, and much more. So, let's go. Hey everyone. So before we start, I just wanted to quickly say that this is in continuation to my earlier video. So if you have not gone through the part 1 of this series, then you should definitely go through that first, because otherwise you would not be able to understand all the basics of pivot tables. So I would highly recommend you go through that video first and then come back to this video. So since that's out of the way, we're going to continue our journey into understanding the basics of pivot table and effectively utilizing it, better analyze our datasets. So the dataset that we're going to use today is again from Kaggle. Links will be in the description. It's a dataset containing details related to FIFA World Cup, including information on players' overall rating as well as their individual ratings for specific skill sets. As you see on the screen here, I have this dataset already pasted on an Excel file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pivot table out of this dataset, like we learned in the previous video. So I'm going to select anywhere on the dataset. I've already checked the sanity of the dataset. It's perfectly fine. I do not have any blank columns in between. I do not have any blank rows in between. So I'm good to go. So all I'll do is I'll click on Alt, D, P and F, which creates a new pivot table into a new worksheet. Okay. Now today we're going to start our work or our session with the design tab of your pivot table. So when you select a pivot table, you will see two tabs at the top. First one is pivot table analyze and second one is pivot table design. Okay. So we're going to start with design first. Now before we get into the design bit of it, it's essential for us to drag some column into our pivot table. So I'm going to drag few columns. So let me drag this club column into the row section, and I'm also going to drag this short name column into my row section, and let me also drag this overall into the values and potentials into the values. Okay, so now I have my data ready with me. The first thing that we're going to see is how to design your pivot table, because this is a default layout of the pivot table, default format of the pivot table. In case you want to change that, you can easily do that by coming to this small section which says pivot table styles and clicking on this small arrow key, and within this you have multiple formatting options. By default we have so many of them and you can choose any one of them, but just in case this is not something that you're looking for in terms of formatting, you can also create your own custom formats. Okay, and in order to create a custom format, all you would have to do is click on this new pivot table styles. It will give you a prompt, give an apt name. So I'll keep it as default, pivot table style 1. I'm fine with it. And for me, what I would like to do is I would like to simply color my header row, okay, into a let's say orange color, okay, and make it bold and italic. That's the only formatting I would need in my pivot table. We can choose other options as well, format for the whole table, format for the report filter labels. So there are many of them. So you can go through them and scroll down and see what all you would require to do. But the basic goes like this. I need it for header row. I'm going to click header row and I'm going to click format. And in the new prompt, what I'll do is let's say first make it bold and italic. Okay, what I wanted. And in the fill section, I'll color it an orange color and press OK. And I can choose to make this format as my default for this particular document. But I'm not going to do that right now, but you can also do that by checking this box, small box here. Okay. And I'm going to press OK. And once you do that, automatically a new section gets added to your pivot table style section. Okay, which is called custom. Now when you select this, automatically the formatting that you chose gets applied to the pivot table and everything else is removed, right? So the default one is removed and now you have a simple pivot table where you have applied a formatting only on the header row. That's why it's showing it like this. Okay, so similarly you can explore other options within your pivot table to choose any design or structure you want for your pivot designs. Now a quick thing to highlight, this custom format will only be applicable on your current workbook where you're applying this. Okay. If you close this workbook, or even if without closing you open up a new workbook, that same custom formatting will not be available on that new workbook. Okay, so this works on a workbook level, not on an application level. So keep that in mind while working with it. Moving on. Now coming to the design section again, we have some other options here. Okay, so it is self-explanatory, but I'm going to quickly show you what it does. Okay, so right now it says branded rows. It's unselected. I'm going to just select this. I'm going to go back to my default formatting. Okay. And I'm going to unselect this. So if you see, the moment I select and unselect something happening here, right? So this is branded rows and unbranded rows. Similarly, branded columns gives you a column defining structure here like this, right? So, okay. Similarly, you have row headers. I can remove the row header like this. I can have column headers removed like this. Okay. Now moving on to the layout section of pivot table. We have a couple of options, and this is where we choose or add elements like grand totals, subtotals, different report layouts and blank rows within your pivot report, and I'll show you one by one how to apply them. So let's say you wanted a grand total to be applied to your entire pivot table. Okay, so what you'll do is just click on this grand table and you're gonna say on for rows and column. So what it will do is it will add a grand total at the bottom like this, and it will also enable the grand total for your rows as well. But because I do not have any column distributing my values, that's why I don't see any grand total here. But let me show you an example how it can be done. So let me add a column here, and I'm going to select preferred foot. Okay, and I'm going to add it here at the column. So the moment I added that value here, you see I have a new total section at the right, which is showing me the total of sum of potential for right and sum of potential for left, which is this one, and then sum of overall for right and sum of overall for left, which is this one, 1617, right? So this is how it's done. So I'm going to just quickly toggle between grand totals so that you can see. I'm going to say no grand total here, and I'm going to say on for rows and column here. I'm going to say only for rows. When I say only for rows, I have this total here, but I do not have anything at the bottom. But when I say grand total on for columns only, I do not have anything in the rows, but I do have something in the bottom, which is the grand total. Okay. Similarly, I can choose to have a subtotal. Again, go back to the design section, subtotals, and I'm going to say show all subtotals at the bottom of the group. Okay, this is called one group. So, and let me just collapse this. By the way, you can collapse the entire group by right clicking and going to expand collapse and collapse entire field. Okay, so this entire section is one group, and similarly these all are different groups that I have. Okay, now if I add a new, I'm gonna again expand this. Now if I'm gonna add a subtotal, right, let me say show all subtotals at the bottom of the group, and if I come down, you will see that each group has a new subtotal to it, right, like this. Similarly, I can choose to have a subtotal at the top. Just click here, and if you see now the total has, instead of the bottom of this group, I have the subtotal at the top of this group. Okay, like this. Now coming back to the design section, I can also choose not to have any subtotals. So I'll just deselect that or select that, do not show any subtotals, or it will not show any subtotals. I can also add a blank row after each group. So let's say after this group, I wanted a blank row, and similarly for each and every group. All I have to do is just click on the blank row section here and click on insert blank lines after each item. So if you see, after every item, there is a blank line added here like this. Okay. Similarly, I can choose to remove that blank row by clicking on remove blank line after each item. And if you see, all those blank row items have been removed. Okay. Now the last part of this design tab is report layout. This is very important because while analyzing your data, this helps you out in multiple ways. So this particular format in which this pivot is defaulted on is called the compact format. Okay, compact form. Okay, this one. What if I want it in a tabular form like we have in our data set like this? Okay, so in that case, all you would have to do is click on this show in tabular form. Okay, so it will align the values on the basis of each column like this. But then now the problem is once it has aligned this entire group, we have some value at the top, the first cell, but then afterwards everything is blank, and then the next cell which is filled up is the next group, right? What if I want it in a table format like we have in the raw data set, that all the values in this group should have the same value here till the bottom, till here, right? In that case, all you would have to do is just again go to report layout and you will just click on repeat all items, and it will repeat everything until the new group starts. Okay, and similarly you have a show in outline form. So now again it's up to you depending on your requirements out of these three options which one you require, and also the repeat all labels and do not repeat labels options, right? Moving on to the next tab, which is pivot table analyze. This tab is crucial when you are analyzing a data because there are a lot of options here which we commonly use in order to make sense of your data sets. Okay, now first one is obviously to refresh your pivots, which we covered in the last video as well. You just click on the pivot anywhere and there is an option called refresh or refresh all. Refreshes the current pivot, refresh all refreshes every pivot within your workbook. Okay, then comes the data source change. So in case you want to change your data source within your pivot table, you can just click here and change data source. It will ask you for the new data source location. You can select that range and press OK. That will refresh your data source within your pivot table. Okay. Now there's an interesting feature within pivot table. So before doing that, let me just clear out something from here in the pivot table so that it's easier to view. And now I'm going to apply a filter. Okay. So let's say I want to apply a filter for nationality. So I'm going to drag nationality to the filter, and within this I'm going to select Argentina, Australia and Belgium. Okay, I've selected 3 nationalities within this data set. Now I've filtered 3 nationalities. Now, did you know that in pivot table you can split our filtered values into multiple sheets using a single click? So in case you wanted each filter item to be represented in a separate sheet altogether, so Argentina in one sheet, Australia in one sheet, Belgium in another sheet, with each pivot in those sheets representing that same value, you can do it in one click. You don't have to specifically copy paste the pivot into the new sheet and do all those things, all those manual efforts again. All you would have to do is just select the filter that you want, go to the small tab which says pivot table, and within this you have an option. By the way, when you click here, you see pivot table name here. This is the name which is assigned to your pivot table. You can change this name as well if you want from here. Okay, now coming back to the main topic, in case you want to separate out the sheets, just click on this options button here and click on show report filter pages, and it will ask you for the filter that you want to select to create those pages. So we only have one right now, so I'm going to select nationality and press OK. So if you see, automatically pivot table has created 3 separate sheets for you by the name of Argentina, Australia and Belgium, the same name by which we had those filters, and each sheet has their own filter automatically applied to it and data representing those filters. Isn't this cool? I mean, this saves a lot of time in case you have multiple filters and you just want to separate all those filters in separate sheet. Instead of copy pasting those pivot tables, you can just click this one button and it will be done for you. Okay, moving on. Now imagine that you're creating a report and you want the user to have the functionality of applying filters to your report. Okay, and this filter is pretty basic, right? I mean, you do not want this, you want something fancy. What you can do is you can insert a slicer within your pivot table, which is dynamic in nature, as in the values that you have in your pivot table will be updated in those slicers and user can interact with them to filter out their data. So this is how you create a slicer. Click anywhere on the pivot table. There's an option called insert slicer at the top. Just click here and let's say I'm going to select a column called player position and press OK. So if you see, the moment I clicked on that, it created a new slicer for me, and all the values which are there in that column player position, I'm getting those. I can choose any one of them and it will automatically filter my data accordingly. I can choose to clear the filter from here and similarly select multiple values within the slicer by pressing the control button to select multiple values. Okay, now we will get into the details of slicers in a separate video, because there are many hidden functionalities within slicer that we would like to explore, because slicer has its own tab. If you see at the top, it is showing another tab, right? So we will explore all of them in a separate video, but for now I think this is the basic how to create a slicer. And in case you want to just remove the slicer, just click on the slicer and press delete and it will remove that slicer from the page. Similar to slicer, did you know that there is a functionality within pivot tables where you can insert a timeline slider within your report? So in case your data set has any kind of date value in it, date column in it, you can insert a timeline slider within your report, which is much more interactive to use than a normal filter. So all you have to do is just click on your pivot and click on insert timeline, and it will ask you for the column that you want to choose. Automatically it has detected in your data set which column are some kind of dates, have some kind of dates in it. So I'm going to select this joined and press OK. So if you see, it has created a timeline slider for me, which I can, just scroll through. I can filter values from here, let's say Jan 98 to August 2019, and it will filter the values for me accordingly. I can, view it by years as well, by the way. I want to see players who have joined in 2018. I'm just gonna click here, or expand it till 2016. So I can do it like this. Cool, right? Although you know that pivot table creates groups based on the values that you have in your data set, when I inserted these two columns, it has automatically created a group, and within those groups it gave you few values, right? But you can also create custom groups. Okay, let's say you want to group 2 clubs together in this data. Okay, and for simplicity, I'm going to remove this one column from here. Let's say you want to club these 4 clubs together. Okay, all you would have to do is select this 4 clubs and click on group selection. What it will do is it will create a custom group for you with those clubs within that group. Okay, now if I want to drag the player name in it, If you see, the group 1 contains all those 4 clubs, and within those 4 clubs all the player names are there. In case you want to ungroup, just click on the group and click on ungroup. That's it. All right. The final section for today's video is pivot table charts. Okay, and just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna, just so that the chart makes much more sense, I'm gonna remove all these columns from here, and instead I'm gonna add nationality to the rows. Okay, so that I have a small table which will make sense in terms of creating a chart. Okay, I'm gonna use this and select anywhere on the pivot table and click on this small button which says pivot chart. The moment you click here, it will give you a prompt where you can choose the type of chart you want to use. Line chart, pie chart, bar chart, column chart, any chart type that you want. I'm going to choose this clustered column chart, and I'm going to press OK. So automatically it created a chart for me with the values in it. I can choose to add one more column to it. Let's say potential I've added to a column, and automatically when I added that to my pivot table, automatically the chart accommodated that column and added that into it. So that's why this becomes very interactive and very user friendly. Okay, also by default it contains a filter to it. So right now if you remember, we applied a filter for Argentina, Australia and Belgium. You can add any country to it, anything to it, and it will get added automatically to your chart. Cool, right? So whenever a data gets refreshed and your pivot tables are refreshed, this will also get refreshed automatically. You don't have to manually refresh your charts when you create a pivot table charts. Okay, similar to slices, when you click on pivot table charts, there's a whole new formatting section within your pivot table charts. You can go ahead and explore. These are all self-explanatory options which are available anyways within Excel, so you can go ahead and explore them. And in case you want me to cover them, so please do let me know in the comment section. I will cover them in a future video. Now you might have observed that I've not covered field items section here. This is because I've already created a video wherein I have showed you in detail how to create a calculated field and calculated item. You will find the links in the description, right? You should definitely go ahead and check that video out. It explains in detail how you can create custom formulas for your columns to make your analysis process much more effective. So that is it for today. Please subscribe to the channel and do press the notification icon so that you get notified whenever I upload new videos. Thank you so much. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.